So the title of Benji's piece is really shocking. Lawmakers worried their colleagues might kill them. How do you feel?
Well, things are definitely tense. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it was very hard to return after a violent mob tried to assassinate members of Congress. And I was one of those members of Congress who were trapped in the gallery for about a half an hour, surrounded by that mob, to hear a handful of fairly depraved lawmakers double down on the rhetoric that led us to that point. So things are tense, and I think that there needs to be investigation in terms of the complicity of some of those members and how they incited the insurrection, but also some of the tours that may have been given in the days leading up to the riot, because I did see members giving those tours, which, of course, were contrary to the health guidelines. Since the pandemic started, we're not supposed to be giving public tours, and they were giving them anyhow. So we're going to do the investigation that's necessary, and we'll hold people accountable that need to be held accountable.
If people do need to be held accountable, what should those consequences be?
Well, there's two parallel tracks here, right? There are criminal investigations going on that are led by the Department of Justice and the FBI, because let's not forget, this was an insurrection against the United States government. This was an attempt to derail the certification of an election in our electoral process. There were many felonies committed. There were murders. A police officer was murdered. Another one died as a result of the incident later. So there will be criminal culpability. And I know the FBI is not discerning whether or not someone's elected official or not. They're looking at everybody. They're looking at all the facts, and then they'll decide how to move forward. Parallel to that, we're going to do our own investigation. In fact, I'm one of the members who's leading the oversight of a Government Accountability Office investigation that we're hoping to kick off here very soon about all of the events leading up to the 6th and some of the security failures and breakdowns. So we'll gather the facts, as we are obligated to do, and then we'll apply those facts to the remedies, whether it's censure or expulsion. But the first step, it has to be to gather the facts.
So no one's naming any names here, but they are citing the QAnon conspiracy theory and the more extremist members of Congress. And there are 3 new members of Congress who have publicly invested their opinions in the QAnon conspiracy theory. Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, Lauren Boebert of Colorado, although she claims that she doesn't have anything to do with it, and Madison Cawthorn of North Carolina. The people elect their representatives, and the people elected these 3 individuals. But given their adherence to this conspiracy theory that alleges that Democrats are pedophiles and they eat children and they're Satan worshiping, what do you do about that?
Well, there will be criminal investigation. And like I said before, it doesn't matter whether someone's a member of Congress or not. If they committed a crime and were involved in the crime, they'll be held accountable for that. There's no immunity from criminal liability just because you're elected to office, nor should there be. We are in America. No man or woman is above the law. So that will happen. Secondly, there are a handful of those members, frankly, who are just so depraved, so morally bankrupt at this point, that they are dangerous people, in my view. And that's why we have to look at applying the facts to what happened and what the remedies are. And then we'll see where we need to go. But people have the right to come and have the obligation to come to Congress and debate politics, to debate policy. But if somebody's going to be involved in trying to overthrow the government, incite a violent mob, and incite violence, there is a line there. And we have remedies to prevent people from crossing that line or to hold them accountable if they have already crossed that line. And that's what we need to do.
You're a former service member. There were former service members in that crowd. Some of them have been arrested. And I believe one current service member has now been arrested and charged in connection with the assault on the Capitol. As a veteran yourself, what do you make of that?
Yeah, there's some tough realities that we have to grapple with here. And one of which is we have a homegrown terror movement in the United States. We saw this on full display. And like any terror movement, they have coming out, they have watershed moments. And I think, unfortunately, this terror movement is pointing to January 6th as kind of their watershed awakening moment. So this is a problem that we're going to have to address in the months and years ahead. Because Donald Trump has radicalized these folks. He has given them permission. He has romanticized that violence. And we can't fix that overnight. The other reality is that a disproportionate number of the rioters, the attackers, come from positions of public trust, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's a prior or current military. And the first step in combating a terror movement is making sure that the agencies and the organizations that are going to combat it have integrity, and that they have the capability to combat it, and that any inside threats are addressed. So that's why I reached out to the military. I talked with Secretary of the Army McCarthy last weekend and raised this issue and pressed him on it and gained assurances that they're going to expedite investigations and a full review of their policies. And actually, as of yesterday, they launched that review, and they're going to continue those investigations. And I'm going to continue to push that to happen.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.